102, yes. Okay, so we are 4 minutes in and almost 100 attendees. I'm kind of torn. Should we wait until 100? Yes, we just passed 100 people. Okay, I think that's enough of suspension and wait. To begin with, I want to introduce one of the lead organizers of TPM meetups, Harman, who is with Airbnb. Harman, welcome on our virtual stage.
Hey, Janet, thank you. Thank you for letting me go. Cool. Let me do a quick share. Okay, let me just share my screen quickly. I wanted to. Okay, do you see my screen, Janet?
Yes, it's coming up nicely.
Okay, perfect. So let me, I wanted to welcome you all here and wanted to give you a quick intro around TPM meetups here before I pass it on to the host for the show. This group started operating in-person meetups in SF, and I learned about it late in 2019 when I joined the meetup at Lyft. I then ended up doing an in-person meetup at Airbnb office just in time before the pandemic lockdown. Since then, we have moved to the virtual model, and this is our third panel discussion this year. We majorly operate via our Slack workspace, and we also have a TPM meetup YouTube page and LinkedIn page. We will post the recording over there, and we announce new events on Slack and LinkedIn. So connect with us via that and keep up to date about upcoming events. Today, we are supposed to have like 300 plus folks signed up. That's a big number, but we are already 100 plus, so we got started. And we have an 80-20 split between Americas and rest of the world. If folks from Asia are able to wake up early, then we will have many more folks. Most folks are TPMs in the current role. Some are aspiring TPMs too. Our Slack workspace is a safe space for us to interact with others and can be used further to make meaningful connections. So if you're not on Slack, do connect with us there. At the end of the event, you will get a survey through Zoom on your browser. It's a small, quick survey. Do fill it. It will help us figure out some more details by which we can send you the invitation to our Slack channel. We will need your LinkedIn profile and your email address that you want to use for logging into Slack to get you connected. If for some reason you are not able to get on Slack, feel free to ping me on LinkedIn, and I'll ensure that the right folks make it to the Slack channel. I also wanted to introduce you to some of my collaborators here for today's event. Zenith, you heard from him in the beginning. Then Jen Russell, who's the TPM at Twilio. And then next you'll hear from Dinesh, who's TPM at Facebook, who will also be the host for today's event. All of our collaborators here have chosen one panelist for today's event and have worked through the questions to ask our panelists and all the behind the scene activities for us to get here. We also have other active collaborators on the group that have helped us in the past events and will work with us in the future events. So that's from me about TPM Meetup. Over to you, Dinesh.
Oh, hey, Harman, thank you so much. I'm super excited to see so many people joining, and I'd like to welcome everybody to today's event. As Harman said, I'm going to be hosting the session today. So we have an amazing set of panelists. So we were wondering about what topic to go for. So we looked at the past history, and we wanted to double click on the technical depth for the TPMs. We wanted to index on the T for the TPMs. So we'll focus more on how to build technical depth. How do we evaluate technical bar while we hire for TPMs during the hiring process? And especially we have also got a set of panelists from different parts of the industry. So we want to understand how T is different in different domains. So we'd like to hear that from our panelists. So we have a super packed, interesting discussion. So without further ado, we'll move on to introducing our panelists. So we'll start with a brief intro for our panelists through the first question. So I'll start with Anshul. Anshul, if you could unmute your video and audio, can you share a little bit about your work history, your journey as a TPM, and how have you arrived in your current role?
Yeah, sure, Dinesh. First of all, thanks for having me here. Harman invited me, so it's great to be here and great to see so many people. So thanks for what you guys are doing. I've been in the industry for around 18 years. I've done my bachelor's and master's in EE, and then I've done my MBA from UTD, UT Dallas. I started in Texas Instruments. There is a group called DLP, stands for Digital Light Processing. I started as an embedded software engineer there, and then worked different things, went into systems, applications, and just stumbled upon program because the project I was doing, there was no program manager. So I just took that role. And since then, I just like the aspect of program, driving things, driving towards an end state. Continued that in a lot of different capacities, different BUs in TI. And then 3 years ago, I joined Magic Leap, which is a startup, and they do augmented reality glasses. And I am leading the hardware technical program management team there. So that's pretty much all about it. I'm happy to share more thoughts and answer any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Anshul. Let's hear from Akila.
Hello, everyone. Good evening and good morning if you're dialing in from different parts of the world today. Really happy to be here, and thank you, Harman, Zanath, and Dinesh for having me. I lead the Portal TPM team at Facebook, and Portal is this video conferencing hardware that we built and launched in 2018. I've been with the team for about close to 5 years now, and I have an awesome team of hardware and software TPMs. And prior to Facebook, I was with Amazon for a few years, and prior to that with EA in the gaming industry. Really, really happy to be here and see this thriving community of TPMs. I did not know that this existed until I got the invitation. So really happy, and I think I'm going to be part of this community going forward.
Great. Over to you, Mario.
Hi, everyone. It's really, really nice to be here, being part of the TPM community, as Akila was saying, right? It's nice to see the community grow. So I started off my career at Oracle Sales nearly 15, 18 years ago, and then I moved into testing, became a test manager, moved into program management, and then started my journey over the last 10 years as a TPM. I was working at Oracle as a principal technical program manager for the last 4 years. And then I've also started blogging and podcasting about TPMs, their journey. And so I wanted to spend more time doing that and also doing some training courses for TPMs. So right now I have a Udemy course which has like 5,000 plus students. So I wanted to, give back more to the community and also like put out more content for TPMs that TPMs can consume. So yeah, very, very happy to be here.
Great, awesome. Last but not the least, let's hear from Mateo.
All right, thank you for the amazing organization and for hosting this meetup. So my brief history, I'm from Italy, so that's where I started my career mostly in Volkswagen, so kind of like the automotive side as an engineer. I studied mechatronic engineering. Then I had the opportunity to move to Dublin, Ireland, to work for Google. And that's where I made a little bit of the switch between the engineering track to the program management track. And then in 2015, I got the opportunity to move to what was back then Google X, the self-driving car project that then went on to become Waymo. And there is where I really started to cement my skills as a technical program manager and really exercise that T again. And then more recently, in 2019, I moved to Cruise, where I was leading the AV hardware TPM team. And now I switched internally to the embedded system team. So it's kind of like moving between hardware and the associated software. And that's where I'm currently leading the team and building out the team of embedded system TPMs.
Great, awesome. It's an amazing panel. To wrap up the intro, so I currently work at Facebook. I'm a TP manager in Portal organization. So been here for 3 years. Before that, I was with Amazon. So been doing TPM, program management, for a while. So it's great to be part of this community. And let's jump right in. So we're going to start off with how do we evaluate technical bar as a part of the hiring process? Basically, how important are testing strategies, system architecture, coding, technical design process? So we're going to go around our panelists and hear from them as to how it is in their respective worlds. So we'll start with Akila for this one.
Great question, Dinesh. So at Facebook, we emphasize on a couple of things when we look at the technical bar for TPMs. The first thing, we actually call it technical, and then the second competency that we assess is called solution design. So technical, what we look at is basically your understanding of a technical domain. This is what you are comfortable with, what you've worked on, or what you've studied about. So really getting deep into your understanding end-to-end of a technical stack. Are you able to articulate the dependencies and complexities and interactions of the technology or the architecture that you're comfortable with? Are you able to troubleshoot issues? Are you able to sit down with an engineer to root cause something and drive to resolution? And can you prove that whatever you decided as a solution did indeed solve the problem? And how was that solution solving the problem? So it's basically diving deep into your ability, your understanding of a technical stack. So that's the technical aspect of assessing someone's chops. The second aspect is solution design. And by solution design, we're really looking at your problem-solving capabilities. Do you understand the problem space? Are you able to bound the problem? Are you able to, when you have to take something and explain it to your engineers or other stakeholders that you work with, are you able to reduce ambiguity for them? How do you lay out an architecture? How do you think about edge cases? How do you think about metrics and goaling? And then when it actually comes down to implementation, how do you think about risks and mitigation and being able to look around corners? How would you scale that product or the solution that you're building? What about performance and reliability and things like that? So it's sort of two sides of the same coin. One is, what have you done? What stack are you comfortable with, and going deep into that? The other is sort of net new, right? Broadly, your problem solving in a technical space. So those are broadly the two things that we look at when we assess TPM's technical capabilities and when we are looking at hiring.
Cool. Thank you so much, Akila. That's great to know. Let's hear from Anshul. How does it work in your world, Anshul?
Yeah, ours is, I think at a high level, very similar to what Akila said, right? But a little bit nuances is our world is more on the hardware and optics side. So most of the time we start with asking the standard question about explain, or if it's able to possible, right, draw a system block diagram of the most difficult project you have ever worked in your life, right? That's where it starts. And in systems in our world is mostly around, there is optics, there is hardware, there is software, there will be a SoC, which is a silicon on a chip, or cameras or perception, those kind of things, right? If somebody is able to, at the step one, able to draw a block diagram, that's a great start. And then you slowly keep going a layer down and down and down and try to see what is the level of detail that person can go. And I personally like to see where they stop, because that tells how big T they are, right? And there is nothing wrong in it. Some people can go really deep. Some people can go 2-3 levels down. It all depends on the job they are applying for. So I think that's where we typically look for. Another thing we gauge a lot is because in the world of optics, you brought up, Dinesh, test and metrology, right? So test and metrology is still very nascent in world of optics. It's not as standard as, let's say, silicon ASIC related products, right? So that's also we drill a lot, because there is a concept called DFM, design for manufacturing, that will look a lot. So does that person understand how to test a system? Because it's easy to design a system, but if you cannot test it, then you're going to be in big trouble. So that's another thing we look at it. So those are the two things I would say is most of our interviews and hiring process is geared towards.
Cool. So it's super helpful to see the other side, just not designing and also like testing mechanisms. Mario, let's hear from your side of the world. How do you guys assess?
So yeah, like I'm going to talk a little bit about how we do it for cloud, right? So if you're looking at the cloud industry itself, you have kind of two large camps, right? There's one set of organizations like Azure, AWS, Oracle Cloud, Google Public Cloud, all of them are building the cloud. And then you have a separate set of organizations who are really moving to the cloud, right? So you can think about this as almost two separate siblings. There's also, of course, Facebook, who has their own infrastructure team as well. So if you think about AWS, OCI, and GCP, there's also some organizations who are building their own non-public cloud for their themselves to consume. If you think about the organizations who are building their own cloud, right? First, I wanted to kind of set context of how large these organizations are. You can think of organizations who are creating the IaaS and PaaS stack. They're anywhere from like 10,000 people to 40,000 people. And the reason I'm kind of giving you this context is when you have an organization that large, there are different functions that TPM is going to play within that organization, right? So you have kind of what I call depth TPMs, who are focused on the compute products, the networking products, the storage products. If you think about the number of products, there are approximately like anywhere from 100 different products a cloud organization sells to 200 different products which AWS has, right? So if you think about that, these TPMs are generally depth TPMs embedded within the teams. They are the TPMs who are going to be kind of working really closely with the engineering teams. They're generally embedded within the engineering teams. And for these kind of TPMs, they really, really need to know all the intricate details of how the service is built. You got to understand that the product or service that they're building is very technical in nature and is built for developers. It's not something which a customer is going to, which a consumer is going to use. It's the consumer here is a developer. So the environment is technical, so the technical bar is higher, so that's one type of TPMs in the cloud world. The next one is a kind of breadth TPMs. These are people who are technically strong, but they're not particularly strong in one vertical. They can kind of move and jump across different verticals, but they generally are solving problems that span the entire space. So these TPMs, so if you look at these TPMs, they generally are fairly senior. They have the ability to deal with ambiguity more, and they're kind of more, they can dig deep when necessary. Let's put it that way, right? They're not experts in one area. But then you have a whole, like, that's the reason I was telling you, right? So if there's 40,000 people, there are lots of other pockets of TPMs. There's TPMs in the compliance world. There are TPMs in security. There are TPMs in operations. There are TPMs in DC planning, DC build out, data center planning and data center build out. This capacity planning TPM. So if you think about it, if you think about the cloud world, what I wanted to kind of give the message was there are lots of these types of TPMs, and you kind of have to pick where you want to be, and depending on what area you pick, the depth is kind of going to be different. I hope I didn't talk for too long, guys.
No, that's totally okay. It was really helpful to hear an interesting perspective of a B2B side of the world, while we have been hearing from Anshul and Akil on B2C side of it. Matteo, like, share with us, how does it work in your side of the world?
Yeah, definitely I can relate to a lot of what Mario was saying. I think there are some TPMs that are more focused on a specific vertical where the kind of like domain specific knowledge is important. And when we talk about hardware TPMs, maybe it's related to, for example, like optic sensors. Could be having that knowledge and experience becomes very important. When we talk about software, like in embedded systems, maybe having specific experience with working with embedded systems, of course, it's very important. And also, like, our TPMs that look look down deep into one specific vertical. Then there is the architectural ones, and for those ones is like really is breadth more than depth, and so it's kind of like a little bit different how you evaluate the technical side. Like you want people that can really like chase problems and programs across different areas, and probably don't need to be an expert in any of them, but they need to be able to speak the engineering language to be able to interface with engineers and learn and kind of like understand what is the problem, what is the program trying to do, what are the objectives, and try to drive those. So it's a bit different. I think there is also, since Mario was referring to the cloud, I think like each of us operates in a different space. For example, like since we operate on self-driving cars, there is a strong automotive component, and that's where like you have some TPMs that actually need to have more knowledge around certifications, safety standards, processes like OEM processes that are actually very complicated, and they are borderline also with sometimes with system engineering and certification. So it's a bit different what the technical bar is in that case. So it's really like a variety, I think, of things that is also nice. It's like it's a diverse set of folks that you bring on board in the team.
Oh, it's super helpful to hear from all of you. So now we have heard what we look for candidates who are coming through our hiring pipeline and how do we assess that. So now I want to flip the conversation and take it that to how could one go about building that skill set? What is required, whether is it classroom, is it on the job, how much of it, like if somebody were to go and say, hey, I want to go build this muscle, how can I go build this? And this time, let's start with Anshul.
Well, I would say, I think there's only one way to learn something, right? Try it, fail it, and improve it on, right? So as I was saying, right, I think in our space, we really like people to be at really at a natural inclination towards looking problem at systems level, right? And one ability they should have is they should be able to modulate it. But what I mean by that is, depending on a target audience, let's say you're talking about upper management, they should be able to go to 1,000, 10,000 feet level of the entire system and able to talk at that level. Whereas if they're talking to engineers on a day-to-day basis, you should be able to go at like a 1 feet level or in the weeds kind of thing, right? To your question, in my opinion, I think the mindset of looking a problem at a system can be developed in college or school or your master's or whatever, right? But the expertise of honing that skill can only be done by practicing it, and just keep doing it, right? And obviously people are gonna not do it well, they're gonna fail. And one time one mentor told me once is, if you want to improve at something, look at somebody who does that job very well and just observe them. And that I try a lot, right? I still do that. That helps a lot. So that's one way of doing it, is if you find somebody who is really good in a skill you are trying to acquire and get better, just observe them and learn from them.
Cool. Mario, what's on the technical depth part, what's required from the cloud side of it, and how could one go about building that skill set, Mario?
So if you're like going to be a depth TPM embedded within an engineering team, I think for a large degree, it's basic system architecture knowledge, right? Akils like said some stuff about it. Anshul said there's definitely a soft component of being able to learn fast, grasp things quickly, and fundamentally understanding how systems work, how modern systems work, right? But I think one easy part about wanting to learn about the cloud is we have a lot of certifications now. So AWS has a very good cloud architect certifications. That's what I did like 6 years ago to get into Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure team, right? So you can definitely do these. They're both very intermediate certifications. They're professional level certifications and advanced level certifications offered by AWS, Azure, OCI, Google Public Cloud. So you just pick one. AWS is definitely more mature from a certification standpoint, so you can do something like that, and it's an easy way where you have a set curriculum and you can learn something, and that'll kind of give you a foot in the door. It's not going to give you 100% of where you need to be, but it's definitely a very easy starting point because somebody's mapped out your study program or told you what to do.
Great. As a person who's not very close to the cloud world, Mario, I have a follow-up question for you. Like, how much of this is transferable between Azure versus AWS versus GCP?
It's fairly the same across the board.
Okay.
Almost like just look at the maturity of the product is a little different, right? Because AWS is far ahead of Azure, and after Azure you have Google Public Cloud and Oracle Cloud almost at the same level. That's the product maturity standpoint. But if you look at it, what the capabilities, what they can actually do, they're fairly linear. It's all almost the same.
Okay.
So you can, if you know one, you know the other, pretty much. There might be finer, minute differences, but in general, it's all the same.
Okay. Super helpful. Matteo, AV is up and coming. How do one go about building that when the industry itself is learning what needs to be done?
Yeah. So you know, I think in this industry, it's a little bit of a mix, a melting pot of like folks coming from consumer electronics, from aerospace, from automotive. So like, you know, it doesn't matter, like, doesn't mean that like if you embark your career in certain field, like at some point that doesn't become like you can resell your experience to another company and another like another program that is actually trying to do something associated with that. So we get a lot of folks coming in from the aerospace, from the automakers, from Apple, from all the consumer devices. So that's one point. I think definitely relating to what Mario was saying, like there are also a lot of good online courses these days. You know, there is Udemy and Coursera, like self-driving cars project that, although like might be a bit generic, and but they help you get your foot in the door and like understand, like start to acquire the language that you're gonna hear during the interviews, for example, right? And like also like what is about that we're trying to do. I think also like what is very important is to me is the ability to learn, like kind of like learn how to learn fast, because in any case, like it's a new industry, for example, and there is not like a recipe for like of things that you should know or like how we're gonna do this thing. And so having like really build that attitude and kind of like have that demonstrate that you actually like having people that have showed that they can move from one subject to the other and still be high achievers. That's also a very good sign, and it's usually a very good skill to have, because things, the only thing we know is that things are going to change, right? So it's like, how quickly are you able to learn and to adapt? I think that's a very important aspect.
Super valuable insight. Thanks, Matteo. Akila, your thoughts?
I think everyone covered. I mean, we're all having similar set of perspectives on this, I guess. I want to plus one to what Matteo said there with respect to the technical aptitude, because I had the privilege of once working with a TPM who came from the construction industry. They were not a TPM in the construction industry, but when they came and started working as a TPM, they, you know, to my knowledge, they are one of the rock star TPMs I've worked with. So it's having that aptitude, it's having that intention to dive in, dig deep, understand, not be afraid to ask questions, leaning in and like getting that technical muscle built is what it takes. But having said that, I would say also that, you know, and I think everybody talked about this, right? There are these breadth roles that are sort of more generic, where we don't really we don't emphasize on a specific degree that they need to have or a specific skill set and so on. It's more just a general technical aptitude, but then there are those nuanced roles, right? You know, we want an audio TPM, somebody who's worked with different audio DSPs and things like that. And that's where I think that prior experience, or even you know, like for hardware TPMs, for example, if they've done an electrical engineering undergrad or postgrad or whatever, those kinds of things start helping. So I would say like that's broadly where we are in terms of, I think, aligned in terms of the fact that it's probably 10-15% your degree and your education, another 20-25% of your your intention to go take a course outside, to go to a classroom and like learn those things. But then a significant part of it is learning on the job and like engaging and like diving in, not being afraid to take that on is what gets you the next job and gets you those promos and learning that you really need to be successful at your career.
Great insights from the panel. So thank you so much. So there are stuffs available.
Can I add?
Please go ahead.
Something. So
please.
I wanted to echo what Matteo and Akils said as well, in a little different perspective from a candidate perspective, right? With hiring managers, we definitely there's so many openings right now, right? Every field. If you look at the cloud, like all the cloud programs are hiring, right? And not everybody would have all the experience that every single hiring manager wants, right? So what I'm saying is, don't put yourself in a box and say, hey, I do not have this particular know-how or knowledge, and I'm ineligible to apply for that, or ineligible to put myself forward for that. Most people have to start somewhere. If you show that talent that you can come in and learn, and you've taken enough steps to go learn things on your own with what's available online, I think that's a great first step. So if I want X, Y, and Z, and all the number of people who have X, Y, and Z in the market is going to be very, very few right now. Because look at Matteo, he's hiring for somebody very specific. Anshul as well, right? Optical TPMs, and then so is Akila. If you think about who has all those skills, there are probably like 100 people in the world who have that, right? And that's growing. But the reason it's growing is people are giving other people chances to come in and learn. So never say that you don't have something and not apply for something. That's all. That's what I want to say.
Couldn't agree with you more, Mario. And like, I'll come to the hiring part. I'm sure all of us have come from the background where like there has been opportunities given and we have learned new things and we have expanded our like skill set. So totally, yeah. I second what Mario is saying. Don't hesitate to put out. Even interviewing itself is an experience. What kind of questions are we getting? Like, how can I prepare that? Go put yourself out, even at the screen or like an on-site. You don't have to make a decision until the offer is on the table. So I'd strongly recommend what Mario is saying. And maybe it's a time where all hiring managers want to do a plug. I believe everyone in this panel is hiring, including me. So a quick plug on that. So having talked about like what is technical depth in your world, what we look for hiring, and looking at all of your impressive backgrounds, you have also transitioned from one place to another place and one world to another world. Would love to hear from you folks on the strategies that you handle. How did you go about it? So I want to start with Matteo. Matteo, you specifically had transitioned from cloud infrastructure deployments to autonomous driving hardware, from there to embedded system software, right? What strategies do you have for managing those transitions through the lens of technology and technical domain?
Yeah. Well, so let me say that first of all, like your building your credibility in your network definitely helps you to make those jumps, because those are the folks that you're gonna work with, and they are the folks that, maybe you are a hardware TPM, you work very closely with an engineering lead on the software side, and then that person moves company, changes role or things like that, and they will ask, hey, do you want to come in? And like, we know that you work hard and that you are willing to learn, and like, so we want to give you that spot and like allow you to give you some buffer to learn, because we think you're going to be successful. And so finding someone that is willing to make that investment on you and be your advocate, and making also like part of like vested in your success, that's super important. That's super important for those transitions, because like you will need some ramp up time when you move from one area to the other. And so I think part of my journey has been like having found like some managers that have allowed me to do that and have supported me in doing that. Now, from the skills perspective, there is also a lot of transfer, right? Like basic program management skills, they are easy to apply across different programs, and so like you can move from hardware to software, and still kind of like move some like of the core program management stuff between the two domains. So that's also something that usually helps. I think also it depends when you're moving, right? It's like if you're moving as an IC, it's one thing, and you might have more issue with the technical knowledge, right? It's like if you're very expert on the software side, but you had zero about the hardware, or from cloud to automotive, like it becomes a little bit harder. As you move up the ladder, and maybe like you are more a team lead or a manager, actually that move it becomes different because you're exercising different skills, right? So I think that's also something to keep in mind. Like maybe as a manager I think it's a little bit easier, because like the way you build an organization, the way you motivate folks, the way you coach folks, the way you try to keep a team happy and performing, it's less about the specific technical environment in which you're operating, but more like how you operate with the team. So that's also a difference to keep in mind, I think.
It was super helpful. There's a great insight on IC versus manager transition, Matteo. So thank you so much for that. Mario, let's hear from you. Like in OCI, you have an extensive experience of onboarding various systems and applications to OCI. What strategies do you deploy? Do you employ to develop depth in those areas, Mario?
Yeah, so at OCI, I probably worked on more than like 7 or 8 teams, and every time I'm generally given a problem and normally the thing is, hey, go solve this, right? And I'll take one example where we had acquired a company, and the goal was, hey, we acquired this company, now bring that product into our stack, right? And this is if you think about the sentiment of the people who were acquired, they're not like extremely happy, but at the same time we have to move the entire product to be integrated. And my goal was, I tried doing it virtually, it didn't work. I went there, I like stayed with the team in a different city. I like built relationships with all the engineering leads there. I like understood every single bit of the product, understood sentiment and the product, and then I was able to like put all the pieces of the puzzle, bring it back and bring it together. I think a lot for me personally is about building relationships and understanding like what the underlying sentiments of things are. Why is something difficult, or why are some people pushing back? So it's working through the problem with the perspective that we are all people and everybody has different emotions and motivations. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much, Mario. Akila, you've gone from gaming to Fire OS to consumer electronics space, and then now in Portal, and in Portal also like software, then hardware. How transferable the technical expertise is, and was there anything unique to one versus another? Talk to us more about it.
Yeah, I think in my case, the skills were pretty transferable, but it's just that for me personally, the scope increased multifold going from Amazon to Facebook, because now at Facebook, I'm responsible both for software and hardware. So some of the things I've done personally to sort of get ahead of that is software is, I can do that. Like, I wouldn't call it a piece of cake, and that would be, we still have our own, we still have a set of challenges. But intentionally, I have, hired a really good set of TPM managers there, leads there who can run the show, right? And where I spend more of my time is on the hardware side, because that's not something I'm really comfortable with. So that's where, again, I engage more deeply. I understand the issues. I sit in on every core team meeting and understand what's going on, understand what the challenges are, what issues are we having with our supply chain constraints, what issues are we having with our factory and ops and with our ODM partners and things like that. So I think, for me personally, it's been intentionally getting more involved with that, just so I get a handle, and then indirectly I can then support my team to solve those problems better, to build those relationships with my stakeholders, to influence that better. So literally, skills wise, I would say transferable, but just in terms of scope and the the amount of direction setting that's required, influencing that's required, and problem solving, it's all happening at a much bigger scale.
Cool. Yeah, totally agree. Anshul, like you are part of Magic Leap, a lot of unknowns, new fields, new technologies. Would love to hear from you on how would one prepare themselves to dive into technical space with Undefined Charter, completely new.
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting question, and I think we still trying to figure out the answer to that, right? But the challenge here is, right, like Magic Leap is a startup, right? So money is always a constraint, and a lot of these projects we do are kind of pathfinding, going into uncharted territories, right? So one thing we have done is we created a framework which we called focused R&D, which is self-explanatory, right? But one different is that at the get-go, it says that we are going to be very flexible on schedule, because a lot of these programs you cannot put a schedule around it because it's unknown. But given you're going to be flexible on schedule, but you're going to be very structured on milestones based growth towards your end goal, right? And milestones could be a POC, which is a proof of concept. It could be a prototype. It could be certain things, right? But it has to be very measurable, very quantifiable. So you can gauge that, okay, you are making success. You are making towards the end goal. So basically, it has to break the big problem, whatever you're trying to solve, into smaller chunks and see if you are going there. And that's where I think the T part of the TPM comes a lot, right? Because these are so unknown things that typically the R&D technical engineers, they like to go in random directions, right? Which for obvious reasons. But the TPMs has to understand the whole technical aspect of it, each milestone, and ensure that the teams are just following the path, right? They will always be zigzaggy, it never be a straight line, but at least linearly you are going towards that. So that process is what we follow, and it has been working fine so far. There is obviously a scope for improvement, but being, in the summary, being flexible on schedule but being very structured on linearity towards goal is the mantra.
Super helpful. Thank you so much, Anshul. So we've talked about different topics. One common thread that have come up is TPMs should have the ability to technically influence the space that they are operating in. I want to unpack that with this panel. Like, Mario, if you could share an example of technical influencing as a TPM, what does that mean? Like from your own career or from a person you have seen operate? What are the key takeaways from that situation, Mario?
Yeah, so I'll just follow with the previous story I was talking about, right? We acquired a company, blah, blah, blah. We are trying to integrate. It's really important to, like, as a TPM, to understand the entire picture of the product, right? Legacy code, new product, old products, pricing, the entire gamut. If you go in, if you're new, especially, I say always play the newbie card, right? You can set up like consecutive meetings with people, like in like 4 or 5 days. You should be able to like get real rundowns from all the leaders and from different parts, right? From architecture complexity, operational complexity, product complexity. So you understand everything, and I think there it's all about you being able to consume that information and make sense of it and put all of it together. Once you have something like that, it's about bringing the consensus or reaching your goal, right? So if there's pushback and you're trying to reach your goal, my general way of working is talk to people individually and explain to them why you're doing something and how it's going to be impacted. Listen, wait, be patient, and hear what they have to say. Take that in, and then try to come up with some kind of negotiating ways of telling what are the possible options that they can go for, right? So if they don't want to do X, can we do something else to reach our goal? And you gotta go in and convince one person at a time. one by one. It's impossible to do this in a group. So you sit with every person, you try to convince them. It's more of a constructive persuasion method, right? And you got to do it individually. And then once you do it individually, then you can kind of bring everybody together. And that's how you can drive a consensus, whether it's technical or otherwise. I think that's the way I kind of do it.
Cool. Thanks for sharing, Mario. Anshul, an example of technical influencing from your career, or what do you have seen?
Yeah, sure. So I think I'll talk about an example which is kind of a continuation of a previous question, right? So almost 2 years back or so, there is something called waveguide, which is a component in a AR glasses, which is the backbone of the AR glasses, right? So that space is very new. The systems, software, design methodologies are not there, so you can't simulate everything. And there are like 10, 15 parameters that really define the image quality of it. That's exactly is what a user sees when they put those AR glasses, right? So the problem statement was, yeah, there are 10, 15 things to do. You cannot simulate them. How do you optimize them? Because it's kind of a bubble, right? You optimize one, you're gonna improve one, you're gonna make other one suffer. So that was going on. We didn't have a tools and all very well thought through. So there are a lot of projects going on and people were working different things. But this TPM, she did a really great job. She took a step back. She really went down, went to the level of understanding the basic first principles, basic physics behind all of that. And she she did a workshop with the tech lead. And then with that, they came up with a roadmap. Okay, that this is what we're going to focus on in next 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and so on. And they pretty much came up with a funnel architecture, right? By funnel architecture, basically, you mean you start with 10 things, you start funneling down, and so that at the end of it, you have your final recipe. So I think that was a really good thing to see what she did with the tech leads, right? That start with a big problem, but very focused, start reducing it. And because you have to do it, learn it, change it, simulate it, and all that, the whole control loop goes on, right? So that was a great thing to see. And eventually the team finally, when they went out of the funnel, right, they came up with a really good solution, and that's what we are launching with. So that's a great example. And again, that the T part of the TPM came in there, right? If she would have not gone on the basics, understood the physics behind all of these, they probably won't have come up with the right ideal optimized roadmap.
That helped her break the problem statement, and like unpack the things and put things in the right direction. Matteo.
Yeah, definitely a really good example from Anshul that you mentioned, like how to be able to use your technical knowledge to question some of the decisions and really kind of like dig deeper into the reasoning there. I think another piece of it is like every program, I think, there are the 3 legs of like performance, cost, and schedule. And most of the times, or at least in my experience so far, especially with younger engineering teams, like in companies that are doing something new, like Waymo or Cruise, like the engineering team will definitely focus on the performance, will sometimes focus on the cost, and the schedule is always something kind of like an afterthought, or like, something that the team typically struggles as they move from R&D to production. And that's where, like, the TPMs, if the TPMs, if they don't understand the technical side, they will not be able to advocate for schedule, because they will bring up like irrelevant points that will not land well with the engineering team. But if the TPM is a well-rounded profile where they can say like, okay, we can make this trade on the performance side or on the cost side to meet certain schedule constraints, like that's where like I see it's influencing the team and the program, and leveraging the technical skills to make better trades across those 3 dimensions. And they always like, there is the saying that you can pick at best 2 and the other will follow, but like you want to make sure that you can highlight the right trades and also bring those trades as explicit decisions, not implicit especially for leadership team. So I think that's another way to think about like technical influencing on the job. That it doesn't mean like you're gonna review the code necessarily, right? But you still exercise that understanding to make better trades.
Yeah, it's a great insight on like bringing schedule into the picture where the reality needs to come in as to what we can do and what is achievable and like the schedule component of it. Akil, I would love to hear an example from your side of the world.
Gosh, this is a great question, Dinesh. There are so many examples I can talk about here, but in the interest of time, I'll probably stick to one. And I noticed that that's also one of the questions on the poll. So I'm guessing people are eager to understand how that TS really shows up in our day-to-day work. So I'll probably take a hardware example here just to keep it simple, and hopefully folks can wrap their head around it. So we're working on a new product, and this new product actually crossed one of our phase gates. We call it the concept proposal at the beginning of this year, actually. And at that time, the POR SOC was a certain, let's say, call it X. 3 months later, we decided to change the SOC for that product. Why? Because there was some other SOC that our systems engineering team had gone and researched that was offering the same performance, all of our able to support all of our AI, ML on-device compute, but it was about $12 to $15 cheaper, per SOC. So the argument was, why wouldn't we use it, right? So obviously, the cost engineers are happy, our product team is happy, our sales team is, like a finance team is happy. So we're saying, okay, let's go do this. The team then started looking at, they did all of the simulation, and then they noticed that for a simple, two-way communication of video call, let's say ARFX on, the readings, it came out to be 50% higher on the power baseline. So what that meant was that our previous ID intent that we had for the product did not hold water anymore, because your thermal design needed to change, because now it's consuming more power. So you needed to have more heat sinks or vapor chambers or whatever. So your ID needed to grow, right? So then the team said, okay, let's throw all of the options on the table. What can we do here? One option is ID needs to grow. And then someone said, oh, maybe software needs to go do more optimization, more power optimization. And someone said, oh, maybe we should change the camera module. And, like we were thinking about a 16 MP, and maybe we should go to 12 MP. Somebody said, oh, like we're having a separate audio DSP, like we should go to have the SOC do that. So there were all of these options thrown on the table. And literally what was happening was everybody was pointing fingers at each other, because the ID team wanted the product to look sleek and elegant. So they weren't willing to budge on changing the ID and letting the product grow. So they were saying, hey, like hardware team, why don't you change something else? And hardware team was saying, software team, why don't you put more resources on, controlling the power budget, right? So it's like all pointing fingers at each other. Everybody has the right intention, meaning like they want their piece of work to be completed in time to meet the schedule or whatever. But who like it was status quo, right? Like they're not able to align. So here is where the role of TPM really comes into the picture. And this TPM said, okay, in a month and a half, we needed to go into our proto build, but they said, okay, give me 2 weeks, we'll come back with an aligned recommendation. And what they did was, they divide and conquer, then they go and sit down with each of the teams. They went to ID and said, okay, what, like, do we really, hardware engineering and ID, like, do we really need a vapor chamber here? Can we think about a heat pipe? And what does that do to the ID? Can we make it a little more longer? Instead of growing in height, can we grow in length a little bit? Then they went to the camera module and said, if you change the barrel this way, and does that accommodate and fit within this new ID, and so on, right? So it's basically then this TPM sitting down with each one, talking about options, and then bringing the team together and say, okay, here's what we're willing to compromise on the ID. Here's what we're willing to do on the camera module. Here's what we're willing to do on, like software, take on these things, right? So it's really coming up with options, getting everybody to align on it, have an aligned point of view, and then bring it back to the leadership team to say, okay, 2 weeks time boxed, we're not pointing fingers at each other anymore. Here are trade-offs that we are willing to do. Here are compromises, and here's what we're going to do, right? So that, to me, is a very, very strong example of when you hit an impasse and teams are not able to talk to each other. So the role of the TPM, because of their fundamental technical understanding of the space they are in. They're able to solve this problem in a very scalable way. They play that enabler role, and they are the voice of reason in the room. They are the enabler in the room, and they bring a very objective perspective, right? Because they're not taking sides with the ID team or the software team or the product management or whatever. So I feel like this is where really a TPM shines, if they are able to exercise the T in the TPM.
Those are really great examples. So thank you so much, Akila, for sharing that. Like the common theme there is it's not bringing just folks together and you solve the problem, but objectively asking the right questions and proposing options and figuring out trade-off. So that came in, Akila, your example, Anshul, your example, that person was like, I'm breaking down the problem statement. So for the folks to do that, they should have a deeper understanding of the space, which is where the T muscle really comes into play. So there was really good examples to understand how this T muscle plays into it. So great, thank you so much for sharing all of those insights. With that, we are wrapping up on the planned set of questions, what I had and what I wanted to hear from the set of panelists. And we see a list of questions from the audience, and that has been upvoted. And I see Harman has taken the first question. I'll read the question for the broader audience, and it's also in the Q&A for Zoom. Assessing a candidate for the T during interview makes sense, but how much of the T is actually usable in a day-to-day life? Most organization wants SDMs and senior devs to be the owners of technical decisions. So how important is it for your organizations at Facebook, Cruise, AWS, Oracle, etc., for a candidate to be technically strong? Harman, over to you.
I mean, we will answer those live here. So anyone from—
Okay, cool. Yeah, anyone from the panel then.
I think it's not about just being owners of the technical decision, right? As Akila was just saying, if the TPM didn't have the know-how and didn't have the technical chops to go and speak to 10 different teams, understand the constraints of each team, understand the motivations of each team, and then come up with resolutions, both in a software and in a hardware setting. You can't do that unless you have, both the technical know-how and also, the emotional way you're thinking of how you deal with conflict, right? So yeah, so for this particular question, you're using the T to communicate more effectively, to understand large quantities of data which you're generally presented with, with very complex architectures that you're going to be presented with, right? And also think about this a little one step in a different lens as well. Other than myself, all the people here are dealing with both hardware and software. It becomes increasingly difficult, multifold, when you're having that kind of complexity, right? So unless you're like technically able to grasp information and dumb it down to different types of audiences, it's going to be increasingly difficult for you to be successful.
That's a great insight. Anyone else from the panel want to add to what Mario was saying?
I think plus one, sorry, Anshul.
Go ahead, Akila.
No, plus one to what Mario said, right? That's, you eventually want the SDMs and the senior devs and the hardware engineering leaders to come up with those solutions, right? But you need to have enough to be able to question their assumptions, challenge their thinking, and look at the outcome as a whole, right? Like I said in my example, everybody wants to do the right thing, but they are so siloed. They're looking at, okay, what do I need to do to make a great looking ID? What do I need to do to ensure all my software is working well? What do I need to do to ensure the camera module is like the best performing, or the audio is the best performing on the device? But then who then looks at it holistically is the TPM. So that's where I think, yes, they all own their space and their decision making, but you bring it all together.
Anshul?
Yeah, I think that was one thing I was about to say too. So that makes a lot of sense, right? The one thing I would say, the part of the question, like most organizations want SDM or senior devs to be the owners of technical decisions, right? One comment I have there is that's very true. right? But a lot of times I've seen that decisions are made without data. Decisions are made without trade tables or trade-offs, right? Because there is always more than one way to solve the problem. And that's where I've seen sometimes the TPMs can add value, right? They should question every decision that is there data behind it? Forget about bureaucracy and all that stuff, right? Most of the time these days that doesn't happen, right? But is there data behind it? Is somebody done a trade table? There is reason why we are doing what we are doing. And then second, as Akila was saying, right, how does it fit in the big picture? So that's where I think TPMs can add value, although a decision it may not be theirs, but they can bring reason to the decision.
And remember that you have a seat at the table. That's something you should always remember as a TPM. Though you might not be the final person making the decision, you definitely, most definitely have a seat at the table. And unless you make sure that you have a seat at the table, nobody's going to give you the seat at the table, right? So it's completely on you to ensure what Anshul just said.
Matteo?
Yeah, maybe completely agree with what has been said so far. I think one more aspect that I've noticed in my career so far is that it also depends on the size of the company, like in the stage. Like earlier on in my times at Google X and Waymo, that was like when there were like 100 people working. I was like the second TPM, like very technical. You get your hands dirty with like I did, from assembling camera modules to writing piece of code and scripts and things like that. Before in Google, like, no, I never got anywhere close to that, because like there was a structure that didn't require me to do that. And so it's kind of like, it depends a little bit. It's not a constant thing I've seen in the companies. Like in the early stages, more R&D, probably a TPM exercises more the T side, and later on, like a little bit less, and you use more other skills, more like kind of pure program management.
Yeah, people do wear many hats in startup, so or early stage companies. That's true. And Mario and Akila, totally right. Be the voice of reason on the table, because you look through an objective lens, and for you to ask the right set of questions, you need a deeper understanding in the space that you're operating. So that's where the T muscle really comes in handy. All right, so that was great. So moving on to the next question. In the TPM, does T stands for understanding the code, or talking about the code, or knowing architecture, talking with engineers at an API level? Anyone wants to go first?
I think Matteo just answered that, right? It depends on the size of the company. It depends on what your team expects you to do. As a TPM, you're generally a servant leader. So you are doing whatever your team needs you to do, whether it's like order lunch or write a scrappy run book, right? So it really comes down to what's required. In general, if you're looking at a larger organization, you generally understanding the architecture, understanding constraints, and those kind of things. You're not writing code.
Yeah, plus one on that. I mean, I just want to differ a little bit from what you said, Mario. I know you meant it as a joke, but ordering lunch, I don't think is a core responsibility. But here is what I would say, right? I look at the TPM's role as an enabler. So if someone says, hey, like we're doing this jam together, like we're in this workshop, can we order lunch? Then like sharing out a resource to say, okay, here's, take the horse to the water, right? Like show people how to fish. So that's kind of how I look at the TPM's role as an enabler, and making sure that people understand what is the process, how do we go about doing a thing, and setting up those frameworks and things like that is totally, the one thing that, though maybe not particularly related to this question, but I do want to say is, TPMs end up in all of our organizations, I'm sure this happens, right? They end up taking so much, they heavy lift so much, and they take up a lot of load that sometimes they end up being the crutch for so many functions, right? Like engineering or product ends up looking at TPMs as a crutch for everything almost. So, my sort of coaching to my team there is be an enabler, not a doer on every single thing. So just want to say that. But I do agree with Mario in the sense that TPMs are not expected to code at all. I do have people on my team that would love to code, TPMs that would love to code, and I have to hold them back sometimes and say like, no, you're not expected to do that, don't do that. But no, TPMs are not expected to code.
I think just I'm thinking of an example here, right? I think it's a really tricky thing because unfortunately, I mean, the job of our TPMs is to get the clock ticking, right? So if they had to do all of this to get the clock ticking, yes. But the other part of it is, right, if there is somebody else's job to do that, and for some reason they are not doing it and you end up doing it, you're going to create other problems. So I think that side of balance has to be also maintained.
Yes, driving accountability. Yep. Great, cool. So moving on to the next question. What are some top technical skills or knowledge should a software TPM absolutely have, especially if they're transferring to this role from a different role?
Maybe I can at least partially cover that or say something about it. Like sure. My experience has been moving from hardware to embedded systems. Embedded systems is the firmware, is the very like low level code. So like knowing the hardware side is very important, and like knowing how the hardware gets developed and what are the different stages is definitely very important. And also like, you know, have a background in electronics is very important to understand like the architecture that you are trying to develop. And especially as a TPM, right? Of course, like as an engineer, you want to have actual more like C code skills, but I think as a TPM, that's like having domain knowledge is probably enough. Must-haves, it really like trying to at least have an understanding of how you come up with the architecture and like, you know, the high level schematics and architecture for like the typical question for interviews is right. It's like, okay, let's imagine we are designing something new, right? It's like could be a new phone, or it could be an over-the-air update system. Like, what are the main building blocks? What would you put in there? What do you think is the complexity of each of them? Like, you don't need to code them, but you need to start to like, you need to exercise that like thinking of the system level. What are the building blocks? How to scope the work that is in each building block, and you know, hopefully that will come up with then with a program with a schedule for each of them, and like where are the highest risk areas and things like that. So I think that's I would say it's an absolute must-have skill, and you know, applies to definitely to the software side. I think applies to the hardware side as well. But probably I'm curious to hear the other panelists what they think also like on the must-have software that may be at the high level of the software stack.
Mario, Akila, because both of you operate at that layer of the stack.
I think it again depends on the type of role. And Mario talked about this, covered this a lot at the beginning, and I talked about it a little bit too. But it just, you know, there are some software roles that are very nuanced, need a specific knowledge. There are some that are pretty broad, and for the broad ones, really, you know, just your technical aptitude is fine. How do you approach problem solving, and how interested are you in leaning in and learning? And one aspect that we also look at during our interviews, which we don't cover sort of in the technical competency assessment, but we sort of like behavioral and other aspects, is groomability, right? Like how open are they for feedback? How do they want to lean in and learn and take constructive feedback and things like that? So that also tells us a lot about somebody's ability, even if they don't have that specific skill. How open will they be to learning and learning on the job, learning from, you know, shadowing others or whatever. So that's the only thing I would add there.
Okay. All right. Go on, Mario.
Yeah, on the cloud side, right? If you're looking at depth, if you're a depth TPM, even within the 4 or 5 areas, right? So you have networking, compute, storage, and then you have all your PaaS services like ML and all of that. Some of the things some of the services are very easy to go in and learn. Like I was in storage, very easy to go in. It's not complex, but it's fairly easy. But if you want to go into networking, I was on the networking team for some time. Unbelievably difficult to go in and learn so much because there's so much you need to learn to just be an entry-level TPM in networking. So I think each area has its own kind of nuances within the depth space of the cloud TPM world. And then you have compliance, which is a whole nother ballgame together. You have over 80 different compliance certifications in the cloud industry. And there is a TPM responsible for one or more of those compliance areas. And they're working with every single product team within the cloud space to get that certification done, right? So you have security. So I think each area, the skill level is a little different. Different requirements are there kind of in each area. So it's hard to bring it all together.
No, it's definitely helpful. Kavita, if you're still listening, I would say if we were to summarize the details, you can choose where you're switching to depending on that area, understand how easy it is versus how difficult it is, so that like you're getting a foot in the door, you're able to go in and learn on the job. Where you tap into the stack might be helpful, because tapping into an audio stack versus an app layer, those are two different things. So figuring out where you make the shift might inform you on what are the skills and what are the technology that you need to be prepping for. Super helpful. Thanks, everyone. So this is an interesting question. Any panelists come from outside of technical background? What was that growth path or experience like?
I might have an interesting. So I'm an engineer. I did my engineering and then I did my MBA. But after I did my MBA, I was in software sales for over like 3 or 4 years, right? So I moved from software sales, then I moved into manual testing, then automated testing, QA manager, program manager, technical program manager, principal technical program manager. So I think wherever you are, right? I don't know who the background, wherever you are, I feel there's a lot of need for TPMs, right? And there are a lot of different opportunities at different sizes of companies, right? And some are more forgiving than others. All you need is the aptitude to learn, and you can start somewhere.
Right. Anybody else?
Maybe can I add something to that? Like my personal experience, like, I have a technical background. I studied engineering, but when I moved to Google, like I started as deployment engineer in the cloud, but then I moved actually to pure program management, and I was on the business side, like making partnership with to resell like our like the cloud products. So completely different. And I think reconnecting to what Mario was saying, like, my way to reconnect with the technical side and to get into something pretty specific, like self-driving cars back in the times was not really big. I looked for a 20% project, like just to get my foot in the door. And like I worked on Android Auto for like 6 months, kind of like for free on top of it. It's a 20%, but it means like kind of taking a bunch of your time, putting on top of everything else you're already doing. And because you're passionate about it, right? And you really want it. And at some point, like usually someone will notice that you're really into that thing and will give you the chance to do something, maybe to join the team. Maybe you don't join as the most technical person, but there is still, like in those new teams, there is still a lot of roles to be filled. There is a lot of demand. So like showing the commitment and that you really care and you're passionate about it, like it goes a long way into this in making a transition, and maybe not from a standard purely engineering or technical background. That's at least has been my experience.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to add here is Facebook also hires program managers in addition to technical program managers. And I do have a few program managers on my team. Some of them are interested in moving to the technical track, and how we help them is we pair them up with a TPM, a mentor who can show them how they do things. They can shadow this person on their projects just to learn, how are they making those decisions? Where are they influencing technically, and so on. So there's a lot of show and tell and learn from that that pairing, that matching there. And in addition, we also give them small programs, small technical programs that aren't big or complex or meaty, but small things that they can start off with and prove themselves. And then eventually they'd have to go through a technical TPM loop, at least the T part, right? The technical solution design aspects I was talking about, in order to formally convert into a TPM. But like that's sort of what we do at Facebook for people. And we have a ton of aspiring TPMs. We also have an aspiring TPM program that's run internally within the company, where there's a lot of coaching and mentoring and like formal, teaching of technical skills that we do for people who aren't in the TPM track, and not just program managers, right? Anybody else who's in different tracks, and for them to get onto the TPM track.
Yep. So yeah, we've had like solution architects convert into TPMs. We've had like people from consulting convert into TPMs. So yeah, definitely. So we are about to close up. So it was really super engaged and insightful discussion. Before we close, any one last advice on the technical depth aspect of how could one go about it? Anything and like everything from the panelists. Let's start with Mario.
I'll do a plug. I have a coaching program for aspiring TPMs. It's called ACE, the Technical Program Management Interview. Check that out on my website, mariojura.com. That's a great way to start if you haven't been a technical program manager particularly.
Great. Over to Anshul.
Yeah, I think a quick one-line answer would be just ask questions, right? There is a theory behind 5 whys, right? The same thing. That's his root cause analysis, or it goes with the same thing, right? Keep asking questions till you really are convinced that you understand what you're asking and working on. I think asking questions, don't be shy. There is no wrong questions, but understand the system.
Over to Matteo.
Yeah, I was thinking about what to say here. I think we said a lot. I think, besides like we discussed a lot, like how it's important the technical side, like how to exercise it, but also at the end of the day, like don't let your perception of your technical readiness to prevent you from trying to get into the field. I guess like, get yourself out, like, interview, like take courses, like try to get in, like try to get your foot in the door. I think that's it will give you a much more strong signal than like your own perception of yourself as a technically ready to be a TPM. So I think don't underestimate that.
Cool. Akila, over to you.
Yeah, I think it is being your authentic self and understanding what you're capable of and advocating for yourself is very important. And really building that technical muscle is what also helps build more better credibility for yourself and earning that respect with your stakeholders. So I would definitely say, I just want to amplify what Dinesh said in the beginning, right? Put yourself out there, go interview, and that's how you learn. You don't need to take the job. You could fail in the interview, but that's fine. But you at least know, what people are expecting and what you need to go do or learn to brush up your resume. So, and the market is hot, guys, and
that's true.
Again, a plug. We are hiring crazy. So bring it on.
Yes. Thank you so much, Mario, Anshul, Matteo, Akila, for taking your time and sharing all of your insights with us. Super appreciate it. Shanat, Harman, over to you. And thanks everyone for connecting and listening.
Thank you for having us, guys. This is fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you. This
Thanks
was
for having
amazing.
us.
Awesome. Thank you all. And yeah, find us on LinkedIn and stay tuned. This is a quarterly event. This is totally volunteer based so far. So you're welcome to join. You probably already got the Slack invites to the Slack space we use. There is an event page. Find us on your social networks, get engaged. The TPM community is strong. It's low in numbers so far, but it's very strong and very powerful. So we are here to help each other, and we'll see you next quarter.